A woman in her 50s has 1 week to live, but she keeps living that week over and over. This is Omni Loop, an alternate take on the traditional Groundhog Day time loop story about reflecting on one's life choices. Let's take a look. Welcome everyone to the Atomic Cinema Experiment. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
I come in peace.
This is a science fiction movie podcast, and today we're going to be talking about a movie that came out in 2024. It's called Omni Loop. So we'll start spoiler free, of course, as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we get the spoilers, and if you're enjoying the show on YouTube, hit the like button, helps out a bunch if you do, and you can support everything and get some bonuses over at Patreon, but I'll tell you more about that at the end of the episode. Omni Loop, as the title might imply, is a time loop movie. The main character is a woman in her mid-50s, played by Mary-Louise Parker, who is told that she's going to be dead within a week. But very quickly into the movie, it is revealed that she's actually already lived through this week multiple times and keeps living out the last week of her life over and over again. So it's kind of like a different spin on the day looping kind of movie. So
yeah, I mean it's a full week to begin with. It gives you a bit more time to play with than just like a Groundhog Day.
For sure. But it's all about, end of life and regrets and all these other things that would naturally fit into that thematically. And she wants to try and figure out why this is working, how it's happening, to an extent. I mean, she knows part of why it's happening, but there's still like stuff to explain there. I'm trying to keep this kind of vague here, but so that's the basic premise, and she teams up with a young student played by Edebiri, who plays a character named Paula, and they kind of become partners in crime trying to solve the mystery of the time travel. That's the premise. I believe this was a Hulu original when it came out.
Yes. I don't know about Hulu original, but at the very least, it's only available on Hulu at the time.
Yeah, it's a Universal movie at the very least, which is has some ties.
I do see on the Wikipedia page, it does say it was released in theaters by Magnolia Pictures, so maybe not a Hulu original, but a very limited theater release.
I feel like someone said Hulu original. I don't know where I got that from.
I think I might have said Hulu original.
You might have said it. Yeah. So, interesting premise, interesting pair of, actors in here. Also worth mentioning, so the main character Zoya, her husband in this, is played by an actor named Carlos Jacott, or Jacott. I don't expect anyone to recognize that name, but I recognize his face, even though it's been a long time, because he is one of the very few actors who had a one-episode role on the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the spin-off to the hit television show Angel, and Firefly. The whole trifecta.
My God. This man got, what would that be? A B, an A, and an F. This man got the BAF.
The BAF.
The Buffy, the Angel, and the Firefly.
Very good. So, I don't know, it's obviously he's like 25 years older, but I was like, wait, he seems familiar, and I'm like, oh yeah, it's that guy who was like on all three shows. That's weird. So, yeah, that's notable, but otherwise, sure. we'll get into things. Knew very little about this going in. The title obviously implied timey-wimey stuff, but beyond that, didn't really know anything. It had a decent set of reviews, so we jumped in and we checked it out. So, David, what did you think of Omni Loop?
I think Omni Loop is a good movie. I think it is... How do I put this delicately? Okay, so there's a certain class of movies that we've reviewed on the show. We did a lot of them like towards the end of last year, which was things like After Yang, Things Will Be Different. There was that, I can't even remember it, the one that starred Jim Gaffigan.
Oh, Linoleum.
Linoleum, that's the one. There's a certain class of those movies where, yes, it's sci-fi, but it is far more focused on the idea of this emotional story it's trying to tell. Like, that's much more important than the sci-fi element. There's nothing wrong with that. That's its own thing of movies. It's perfectly good. But that specific class is also, I feel, hallmarked by the idea of, boy, this is a great short film. This is a fantastic, 45-minute to an hour-long piece of just really going through and doing what you're doing here. And then when it's changed into a feature, it feels maybe just a bit too long. It feels like maybe we're overstaying our welcome a little bit, because I mean, the core themes of this movie are, you know, about facing mortality. It's about the legacy you leave behind. It's about how you're going to be remembered. Big topics. It handles it deftly. I don't think it's doing a bad job with that. But there is a point, probably about an hour 15 in, where I just felt like we were done. We just have said everything we probably need to say, and we can get to the final part of the movie. But then it just kept going for a while. And that's where I think this, my only main criticism in this is that while it is a great concept, they use the time loop stuff interestingly. The editing is fantastic. They really make it punchy here. It just overstays its welcome a little bit too long for me, to the point where I was getting bored by the end with what they were doing. So I like it. It just has that one tiny flaw there.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. The movie's almost 2 hours long, and it kind of like, I think you get all the points that it's going to make by the 30-minute mark, and you're just kind of waiting for it to play out all the obvious realizations and character growth that was always going to happen. I don't think I'm as kind to it as you are, though. I found this a little bit tedious to sit through in a lot of ways. I don't have a problem with a sci-fi movie that uses the sci-fi just as a sort of platform to do the more emotional stuff and the more like other stuff. But this movie actually frustrated me in places with how sort of nonchalant it just kind of presented things. Like, it kind of like just casually mentions this other sci-fi stuff going on a couple times in the movie, where in a different tone it might have been seen as like a quirky throwaway line that's just meant to make you chuckle. Look at the crazy things that are also happening over here. But in this movie, otherwise feels like it's just set in the modern day real world, and it feels so weird and out of place to just casually say this or that thing is going on.
Right.
So I had problems with that, but my main thing really was just, it feels to me just so, I'm trying to like, I guess I believed when I heard it was a Hulu original because it feels like a streaming movie. And I mean that in every negative way that I am intending to, which is it feels like it's got some ideas. It's definitely poking at things that I like, but the actual motions of going through it is so underwhelming, and nothing's ever exciting. Nothing's ever that emotional to me. In theory, it should be. It's this woman like sort of coming to recognize her mortality and or the regrets she's had in her life and what was important to her and all this other stuff. But like, it takes so long to get to the point where she's having these, like, honestly, when they started doing montages of the various time loops and all that, like, I should be excited, I should be intrigued by like the progression, and I don't think I've seen a time loop movie where like nothing feels like there's anything being learned in each time loop. It's actually kind of numbingly to sit, like, because other time loop movies, whether it be Edge of Tomorrow, Happy Death Day, of course the original is Groundhog Day, there's this general idea where you start with them being in shock that they're in a time loop, and then you see them try to sort of like figure it out, and then you see kind of the long form idea of it as well. I've got infinite tries, so I can keep trying this and this until I find the winning combination to get to this next stage of something I want to accomplish. So there's a sense of progression, there's a sense of a goal, there's a sense of momentum, and there is a goal technically here, but like, they literally do a thing in this movie where after montage upon montage of going through all these loops, we see the characters doing the exact same scientific test they did in like the first real loop, and the frustration of, oh, the same results again. And I'm like, of course it's the same results again. Why are you running this test again? You saw the results 50,000 loops ago. This is like, and I get that from a character perspective, maybe you're saying, oh, this is like part of her character flaw is she will just try the same thing over and over again. But that didn't make it fun to watch. It didn't make it inventive, or I wasn't like getting excited about the possibilities or the things we were learning, either from a science fiction point of view or what this movie wants to focus on, which is the character journey point of view. But like, I don't know. I was getting very little from this by the halfway point, and I was just kind of like waiting for it to end after the halfway. Like, the back half of this movie, even though technically it's doing its more emotional stuff, by that point, I was so lukewarm on everything the movie presented to me that I was just waiting for it to end, and I did not care about anything. And you know, the ending just kind of annoyed me as well, but that's the subject later.
That ending is You're either gonna like it's gonna resonate with you super hard, or it's not gonna land at all. There is no in between. I will say, for the one bit that you were saying there with running the same tests again, maybe I'm being forgiving to the movie, but I took it as like the whole first day of the loop, more or less, is just her trying to convince her partner of like, yeah, this is a thing, like do what you got to do. And like that just happened to be on the first day of trying to get her in the loop, and they always have to run this test. Like that's always a thing we have to do. But I agree. This entire movie does kind of feel like that one part of Groundhog Day where he's trying to save the old man, and we just it's a repetition of failures, which in itself can be enlightening to a character. It can change an idea of like what they do, how they act, but the whole movie is like that up until a certain breaking point. And by the time we get to that breaking point, it is kind of like, well, I don't care, because I haven't seen the character start in a place and change at all. Like we've started in this continuous failure, because that's the other bit of the movie, is that we don't enter this at the beginning of the time loop. We don't enter this with her first go around, and that's fine. You can do that. But it does give this idea of how much has already been done.
If anything, that's maybe the most interesting thing about it, is the fact that we're starting already like several loops in, and like, you know, there's a reveal that she's already lived this before, and like that was the most exciting from like a inventive screenplay approach to this concept that I like it ever got for me. And that's right at this, you know, in the first 10 minutes, and it never reached those heights again. Because that's the other thing, is that honestly, like a lot of the movie ended up feeling like a pointless side quest by the time we actually get back around to the end. And I weirdly thought that some of the things they bring up or introduce in relation to the sci-fi elements is like kind of like so weirdly specific that it felt like it was going to build to an answer or build to some kind of reveal about why it is the way it is. And then it never did any of that. It never even, you know, had any interest in doing any of that. And that's fine to a point, but it kind of set me up in a different way, because it was focusing. We're literally following characters who are going to a lab to try and scientifically work things out. You're setting me up with expectations of, oh, we're going to get some kind of like, even if we don't get like a concrete answer, maybe they'll find something they can't explain. But I'm assuming they're going to get to like more like on a scientific level, there's something mysterious here, and maybe that you know, suggests the existence of a higher being or something, and go philosophical at that. I don't know, but instead it just ends up not mattering pretty much, and it feels like half the movie is just wheel spinning that didn't need to be there. And frankly, unlike some of those other movies you brought up earlier, right, you compared to like Linoleum, where the sci-fi element's basically a way for it to have a unique sort of structure and editing style and how it presents its information. You know, After Yang is using the fact that we can look at this like robot's memories to discover who they are, so it's a unique way of looking at someone's life after the fact. It doesn't really need any more of an explanation than that. It just kind of works and does what the story wants it to do. Here, I'm like almost thinking that the sci-fi element is almost in the way of focusing on the thing you actually want to do and talk about. So if you're not going to actually use it to enhance the story, then don't do it at all, because it just leaves me cold.
Yeah, it's one of those things where the idea of it, the element of the time loop, is not played up for the idea of the sci-fi element. It is almost explicitly there as a metaphor for the malaise, the melancholy of feeling like time has been wasted, like this idea of being stuck in a rut. Like it's used metaphorically in that way, and in that way I think it's kind of strong. But yeah, as it does other things where it introduces the other sci-fi elements, I mean, it's not a spoiler because it's literally the first lines of the movie. The illness that this woman has is that there is a black hole growing in her body, and the doctors say this as like, oh yeah, you know, it happens to people who are exposed to radiation for long periods of time,
and they never, you know, question what that means. Like, is that normal in this world that people have black holes growing in them? It's just sort of taken as like a shrug. Yep, you got a black hole, you've got a week maybe to live. All right.
But from a metaphorical standpoint, to say that someone has a black hole like right where their heart is, like that is metaphorically very rife of interpretation.
The metaphor is clear as day. It's almost insultingly surface level, just how much is screaming it in your face. But this reminds me actually of a lot of crappy horror movies where they're like, oh, this is what the ghost represents. It represents the character's trauma, right? But that's not enough. The ghost itself has to also be fun or intimidating and feel like it's giving you the fun adventure. And then the metaphor is also there on top to give it some depth. When you just have the metaphor, the rest of it's actually kind of dull to watch because you're like, oh, and this means that, what to do? Like, you have to have both layers. Otherwise, it just... So, because it pretends that it's going to be this, oh, we're going to research this and figure it out, and we've got a call to action, we're going to work together, we're going to have almost like a Doc Brown and a Marty McFly team up with these ladies. I'm like, yeah, that's cool. Like, Ayo Edebiri is the Marty McFly? Absolutely. Let's do it. And it just amounts to nothing. And ultimately, and also the other thing with the time loop is that they're clearly not interested in overly trying to like really strictly follow the rules of a time loop. There's sometimes in this movie where like they just want to gloss over how Zoya has convinced Paula on this new loop that they're supposed to be working together again, just to get us to the point where we're not going through the learning process. But sometimes Paula in an argument brings something up that she's like kind of mad about, but the thing she's mad about is from a previous loop. So even if you say, oh, Zoya told her about that, I mean, that's one thing, but that wouldn't make her feel it. That wouldn't make her feel like, oh, you did this to me. And I'm like, but you don't remember that. That never actually happened to you. So why are you pissed about it?
That's like, it's kind of like the denouements that like dip right before the third act starts. And without spoiling too much, like, Paula at one point is just basically saying like, how many times have you left? And it's like, you shouldn't be upset over how many times in previous loops the person has left, because this one has not left. Like, this one has been here this whole time.
You don't remember any of that, so this is still a person you met 2 days ago. So what are you what are you complaining about? It's very, very strange. It feels like it's not like... Because part of the fun of a mechanic like this to me is the limitations and the rules of like, okay, this character cannot remember that, so how do we have drama that comes through? And there is almost a suggestion at one point that, or maybe in some spiritual level, you do feel a connection to me now because I've spent, 100 loops getting to know you.
Right.
So maybe deep down you do feel some kind of instinctual connection. And I'm like, okay, that's an interesting idea, but the movie doesn't do anything with it.
No, not at all. I like the idea because it also does that with the other family side. Because as much as Paula's there, a lot of this movie is focused on the idea of she's doing this specifically so that she doesn't have a week to live, so that she can go back and like get treatment earlier and be able to spend more time with her family. But to do so, she needs to keep on ditching her family and keep on doing this research stuff. And it explores that kind of topic and goes through the idea of like, is it better to work for more time or to spend whatever time you have? And I think it, again, with the metaphor level, it does a great job. It explores that. It does a great job of dealing with the family stuff. But it is an idea where when they bring up these things and like bring it to the surface level, it feels like it's present for the one scene where they're bringing it up. And then outside of that, it's just kind of like, yeah, well, don't worry about that anymore.
And also, like, it works for the metaphor, but it also doesn't work in like a more like straightforward logical sense, because I'm like, you're repeating these weeks. You could literally take a week off from doing the science stuff, spend a week with your family, and then go back and do another week with the science stuff. You could literally alternate so you feel like you're distributing your time, because you've got infinite loops. So just
and that's kind of the problem where I felt like entering the movie already with her looping, and not even just already with her looping, but already sick of looping, already being like fed up with it, is I wish I knew what she was doing with those loops, because for me it feels like nothing. She was just doing the exact same, like she was just living the exact same week over and over again with zero attempts to change anything.
Again, the metaphor of being in a rut and just letting life pass you by and whatever else you want to say all clicks, it all makes sense. But from an actual character story of watching how someone tries to tackle something or gets to the point of being motivated to tackle something, it's just not that interesting or satisfying. So, I found myself very frustrated with this movie. Especially once it got to the point where the main characters had met each other and we started actually doing the stuff. Once I started going through the research and I realized that it was never going to become like anything closer to what I would have been excited about with this premise. Everything from that point on, and like doing more flashbacks and doing more like, oh, let's learn more about her time in college and regrets she's got and stuff like that. I just like, I get it. I get what you're doing, but like ultimately it never rose above like lukewarm temperatures of like you're doing everything reasonably competent from a character perspective, and I can see why that may work for some people, but it feels like any other, like I said, it's not technically a straight to streaming movie, but it feels like one in how it's presented, how it looks, the directing, like sort of standard, the way it feels like characters just stop to explain things sometimes and say what they're feeling rather than giving us hints as to what they're feeling, right? It's like, oh, Paul is going to storm out and then she's going to ask what's wrong and she's going to like tell her backstory. So there's not going to be any interesting way we see that there's tension growing. And again, it's kind of hard to have tension growing because Paula just met her today. Because the implication, like, that's one of my big things with that part of the movie, actually, is that when Paula gets mad at her and says, oh, you did this, or like, you know, you've done this in previous loops.
Yeah.
We know it's the first day because they're literally in the bit where she says, okay, I think we should get started with this. So they're telling us this is the day one, they've just got into the lab, and it immediately breaks into this argument because of what Zoya says next. And some of the things Paula says make no sense based on the fact that she's known this woman for maybe 3 hours. It just it doesn't click. So use those limitations. Okay, you can't have her knowing these things, right? So part of me was like, well, spend more time in one of the loops so that we actually have time to build something over the 5 days, because you can do a lot in 5 days. 12 Angry Men set in 90 minutes of real time, and by the end of that, the tensions are raising super high through the roof.
Can somebody like go through and just like anytime we compare a movie to 12 Angry Men, just make a supercut of that?
It's a perfect comparison, though. Like, all movies should aspire to be more like 12 Angry Men.
It's true. No, I agree with you. I think it's kind of the downside of presenting this with so much sci-fi flair is that we are used to a certain language with that, and it's fine if you don't want to play by that language. It's fine if, like, you know, you want to introduce a robot element to your movie, but you don't want to go with the whole like am I human subplots and stuff like that, because it's fine to mix that stuff up. The difference is with this one is that it feels like it wants to straddle the line. It feels like it wants to do some of the stuff with standard time loop fare of like growing over time and discovering more about another person. But then it also really just doesn't want to spend the time doing that.
Which would be, like, I think maybe one of the benefits this movie could have had is to just decide to not have like reasons for it. Just have her magically start looping in time. And like just have her deal with it rather than being about. But then of course half the movie's literally pretending about. It's pretending that her and the other characters are trying to figure out why it's happening and how it works, and that never goes anywhere. Nothing's ever solved. They never. And it's like, and again, I'm not saying that we need definitive answers by the end where it's all explained, but they never accomplish a single answer for anything or understand it even a little bit better by the end. Like nothing is accomplished with any of it.
I agree with you from a filmmaking perspective. However, I do think from the theming, the idea of leaving behind a legacy and what you'll be remembered for, I feel like that's very intentional. The idea of like the thing I've spent my whole life setting out to do, I didn't accomplish, and then I need to be able to be okay with that.
Sure, but then it shouldn't have been framed the way it was. It should have been framed differently so that point hits home and it doesn't feel like I wasted my time, because so much of the middle of the movie is about that. Like an hour in the middle of this movie is about that, and it really is. And every time it does a montage of her going through loops, it's just like none of it's that interesting. There's nothing fun, because other time loop movies are, you know, they're fun and kind of funny because like, hey, this thing happens and it annoys the character or whatever. This is like, no, she's miserable because she's dying and she's full of regret.
I mean, yes, especially by the time you hit the second half. However, I will say the editing style of this, especially in the first half, and I would argue a lot of the character stuff as well, she is like snappy. She is quirky in a lot of ways. It is, at least the first half, I feel like is meant to be played up for some level of enjoyment, which only I'm agreeing with your point in that I don't feel like the character and the plot stuff is really matching the sort of tone in that first half.
It's too dry, I think, or it's not, or maybe dry is not the right word, but like It goes back to what I was saying about just everything feels very lukewarm, where it feels like, okay, you've decided you want to give her this bit of a personality where she's being kind of cynical and saying, oh, hey, this rhino that they're touring with that's got one horn and it's the last of its kind, and she's like, it's going to die in 2 days because she's seen that already. Like, right. That type of attitude could be interesting to have her be cynical and jaded. And I think there is a tone there and a directing style that would, amplify that and make that clear that that's how we're supposed to feel during those sections. But everything is just so tepid in the way that it's presented. It just feels like it's not committing to a style. Like, honestly, I mean, I clicked on the director here. Bernardo Britto is the director.
Director, writer.
And I've never heard of anything else that he's done.
I think this is like, there's one long, like an actual feature film. Everything else is just looks like animated shorts. Yeah.
So, like, no, I don't want to sully the man, but like nothing about this felt like it had a strong creative, and not even just a strong creative vision, but like momentum. The amount of movies, and this is maybe the number one thing that makes something feel like a straight to streaming movie to me, and again, this technically isn't one, but it felt like one, is a lack of momentum and drive, like a sense of purpose that one scene leads to the next one. And there's so many times in this movie where we're into a new loop and there's nothing getting into that loop that feels like, oh, this is the goal for this loop because of what happened in the last one. It just kind of feels like, oh, they'll just, we'll do a montage of the same thing again. Maybe there'll be a heart to heart this time in a different place or something. And that's kind of it. So, nah.
No, I mean, wow. That's been a while since we just heard a straight up fart noise onomatopoeia. No, I agree with you. I think for me, I am a little bit softer on the idea of the theming and the idea of what we're playing with. But I think if I really had to boil it down, I would be okay with seeing something from this writer again. I don't know if I'd be excited to see something from this director again. And they're the same guy. So
yeah, I think the other problem is as well is that while character arcs tend to be probably fairly predictable, because you present a character at the start who's flawed in some way, and you can kind of say, well, if the arc goes the typical way and they improve, they learn how to evolve from that, then this is probably what the arc is going to be. Sometimes they'll surprise you, but I feel like this one in particular, like, it's like, well, obviously, and again, like, we're not in spoilers yet, but I don't think even telling the audience here that ultimately she's going to learn that her family's what's important and that she should be happy for the time she's had, with her family, right? It's like, that is so painfully obvious where the whole thing is going to go, that by the time she starts having these moments where she starts to think that way, I'm just like done. I'm like, Jesus, you should have been thinking this an hour ago. How is it taking you this long to have this thought? And again, it's all undermined by the fact that there is no reason why you couldn't have been alternating between loops. And it's not even like you have to be honest about it to Paula. You could tell Paula, yeah, I've came to you every loop. She wouldn't know otherwise. You could have spent 5 loops doing other shit and then came back and was like, okay, time to go back to Paula for a loop.
Yeah, I do think it's one other thing about the setup of the time travel aspect, the time loop, that makes this, I think, a little bit interesting is that it's voluntary. This is not something where she is stuck in the loop.
Sure. I would maybe not go too far here because I think that we're maybe getting spoiler territory with that.
No, that's fine. Yeah. It's said early on, though, like as she's walking through the logistics of it. It's voluntary how she does this. And then the second thing about it is that it does, like, what's the easiest way to say this? There's no early reset, I guess. A lot of time travel or time loop movies, if you mess up a loop or something like that, there's usually like an early reset.
Death.
There's something, where you're just like, all right, let's go back to the beginning. There's no option for that here. And I think that that's something that could have been played with. The idea that no matter what happens, she has to go through this whole period in order to get back to the start, especially during the parts where she's trying to convince Paula of, like, because that's day one. She needs to figure out how to convince Paula day one. If it takes 7 go-arounds to get that to happen once, that would have been prime material.
That would have been like 35 days worth of like living to get to that point. It's very frustrating. Also, the time in theory that she's supposed to reset and go back is supposed to be the same time every time, and it's presented most of the time as her in the same place, but there's a few times where she's not in the same place, and the time of day is definitely different in 1 or 2 of those, and I thought that was setting something up, and then it just is ignored and it's never addressed, or
I couldn't say I even noticed it, so fair enough.
Yeah, there's that. But I do want to get into the mechanics of like how the loops are happening, because I think that also is like they opened a can of worms with how they did it, and then I think that like I kind of knew the entire time they were never going to give me anything that was going to satisfy me with like by the end. I was like, this is I can almost compare it to like how it's going to feel even before it happened. I'm like, this is going to feel at the end of this other movie, and it kind of did in a bullshit way. So
yeah, no, I mean, as soon as I saw it happening and like I got the full explanation of like the mechanics, I was like, all right, how realistically, how are we going to be able to end this movie? And I got down to like 2.5 options. One I didn't think was like a full option, so I wasn't even considering it, but it was definitely one of those where I was like, yeah, there's not really much you can do once you set the rules. This is not even inflexible, it's just vaguely described, but also like unable to budge from them, you know?
Well, the frustrating part is the more obvious thing that most time travel movies would do, a character even suggests. And then I'm like, well, you've just said it out loud like half an hour before the end, so you're not doing that now. So we're going to get the bullshit emotional version that just has no explanation.
Yeah.
Slap it up. Yeah, I kind of dislike... like, it's not a bad movie. I think it's very middling, and my score, I'm going to have to give a very middling score. But it's middling in a way that pissed me off, where I'm like, this could be cool. This could be something I'm way more into, that has strong character work, that has the metaphors, but actually is also an engaging sci-fi movie. And instead, it's like, I don't know, like... Even with this tone, there's probably another director who could have done something with it that would have worked for me, where the scenes individually would have been a lot more engaging for me. As it is, though, it felt like, I know, everything's just sort of like flat lit, like a soap or a comedy.
No, I think what really would have made this work a lot more for me is 20 minutes into the movie. Once we get established, once we say like, okay, Paula's on the team, we're working together, stuff like that. Have someone suggest a way of like, we will run all of these tests in sequence, and all you have to do is remember where in the sequence we're at each go around. And like that way we know realistically how much have we done each loop. And then all we would need is every like 10 minutes, flashback to that whiteboard showing how far along this sequence we've managed to get, showing how many tests we've run over and over again. It makes it feel like there's forward momentum. It makes it feel like we're at least doing some scientific work here, as they're promising they're doing, without them even having to spend the time doing it.
Yeah, I just, something that feels like there is momentum, something that it feels like anything's a because even once like they do like the first big test that proves, oh, I was always right about something, it's like, okay, then what does that mean? Oh, it means nothing. Nothing's ever going to come from it. Okay, doesn't matter.
I was right about this thing, but my work also says that thing is BS, so whatever.
Yeah, so anyway, we have to get spoilers, I think, to talk about it anyway more. So spoilers for Omni Loop. From this point on, you have been warned. All right, let's talk about these goddamn pills, because I like, so when she first, like, so she goes through, like, you know, we get like not a montage per se, we see a bit more of it than a montage, but you get like the first 5 minutes or whatever of her, you know, waking up in the hospital, the daughter and the husband getting the news about her black hole in her chest, more on that later. But it's like, okay, we see her being taken out, her son-in-law is helping her with a wheelchair, and here's like the things she does throughout the week. She goes to like update her will, blah blah blah, 55th birthday, surprise, and it's also kind of early because, well, you know, she's dying, so I guess they felt, well, we'll jump the gun. So it's like, okay, she gets a nosebleed and she goes upstairs and she takes a pill, and that's when the loop happens. Now, when she shows this / explains it, I didn't get that she was initiating the time loop with the pill. I thought that just happened to be when the loop reset, not that the pill was actually causing it. And it wasn't until later where it became clear. I was like, oh, the pill's actually causing it. And she would like say to Paula, oh yeah, like these pills. And then I was like, well, where did you get the pills then? Like, talk about the pills. Where did the pills come from? God damn it. And then eventually Paula, in whatever loop it is, finally says, so where did you get these pills anyway? And she's like, oh, I was 12. And I'm like, oh yeah, there was that quick like scene right at the start with her as like a little girl, 12 years old, looking down and finding these pills, and a voice says, oh, you'll change the world someday. And I'm like, okay, all right. Now, the only obvious explanation that's going to be remotely satisfying here is that the time travel stuff is figured out, that they figure out a way to make it longer than a week, and she goes back in time, and the reason why the pill bottle says her name on them when she finds them as a kid is because she put them there for herself, right? Or someone from the future put them there for her, so that the time, the time stream continuum would remain intact, because she'd still go on to do all the time loop stuff she's supposed to do. But about 2/3 out of the movie, Paula suggests that, and I'm like, well, she's suggested that now, so it's not going to be that. And instead, it's none of those things. Why are the pills there? Who knows? They're just there. The voice she hears is herself, because after she's died, she goes back and whispers in her own ear.
Look,
or something.
The ending is 100% just that emotional, like, don't think about it. It doesn't make sense with what we've set up. Just know that she now exists outside of time, and she can do what she wants.
Look, the pills, okay, I don't necessarily mind the idea of the pills from some angles, right? I like that there is some solid rules to this, right? She can't just take a new pill halfway through the loop. She has to wait the 5 days for it to, like, that's how long it lasts, right? The pill's in your system for 5 days, and when the pill's done, then you can take a new one. So she always takes it at the same time to go back these 5 days and sort of extend her life, right? Fine rule. But at one point in the movie, Paula takes the bottle and she gives them back before she does anything with them. But Zoya's like, hey, were you going to take one? And it got me thinking, if Paula takes one halfway through Zoya's loop, so she'd start her loop a few days before Zoya's loop starts, could, like, some daisy chaining go on where they eventually keep going back, especially if you get a third person, so you're all overlapping a few days and eventually go back in time that way with everyone looping back and back and back.
Well, maybe not. I was going to say the thing is that the way that the pills are described later on in the movie is that, yes, you take a pill, and then when you go back into the loop, obviously the pill is back in the bottle because you haven't taken it yet.
Yes.
So that's why, she got these pills when she was 12,
but they're
she still
infinite.
has pills left. Yeah. So I was trying to think, would that actually result in any pills being lost? But I guess not, because every time you went back to the beginning, there would still be a pill in the bottle.
Yeah, you're basically just taking the same one over and over again, effectively.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're right in that theoretically, based off the rules of the movie, that could work. That being said, it wouldn't work because the movie didn't want to do that.
Yeah, the characters never even think of that. I already thought of a solution so you could go further back. You just need a few partners to keep daisy chaining the loops back in time. Yeah. So there's that.
The one thing that Paula brings up, though, is she says, yeah, I thought about it, but then I realized, like, that's how I get a black hole in my chest. It would cause that through repeated use. Yes. So the idea is, like, I don't want to do it because it would kill me.
Well, here's the other. Well, you don't know that for sure. That's the theory. And to be fair, it's a solid theory, because a black hole is a weird thing to get, and it is timey-wimey related. So I guess that's your reason for it. But the other thing that I thought was an interesting plot device or element, or a story element of her backstory, is that we find out that she had been using these when she was in college, and the reason why she had a very good, successful, test scores, and she was very successful academically, is not because she was smart. She's admittedly cheats because she would just go back in time and retake the test. And like that would be it. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. You did this in your youth, and it might have caused this illness later that's going to kill you, which could almost be an allegory for drug use or something else like that may have led to something down the line. That's an interesting concept. The idea that you did this in your youth and now you're using it again to prolong your life at the end, and kind of that time back into your regrets and whatnot. But also I felt like they didn't do anything super interesting with it. Where I'm like, wait, that's all you used it for, was to do well in some tests? That's it?
Yeah, I like they bring that up in order to lead into the idea that her as a scientist, she was a failed scientist. She went off and like did home life and stuff like that afterwards. But the reason why is that despite her theoretically being into science and wanting to like make some changes and stuff like that, she hates putting in the work.
Yes.
She likes the solution, but she hates putting in the work. And I think that is the most characterization we get for her, because it also informs like why she feels so much disdain towards this time loop and the process that they're doing, where like Paula, even if she's not aware of it, is always coming in with the idea of like, okay, let's do this, let's do that. And what feels like only maybe, apparently it's been a lifetime, as we get confirmation from Zoya later, but what feels like it's only been a couple of weeks is like we've tried everything. I don't want to do this anymore. There's no way to solve this. I give up.
Yeah, and can I just say one thing? It's not that compelling of a main character who just doesn't want to try anything. You know, it's like I get that that's the point, and we're trying to like explore that type of person, but ultimately it's not an interesting character to watch who doesn't want to actually try and solve anything.
Yeah,
or at least you need good writing to make that work, and I don't think this movie quite has that. The other thing I want to say though. So back in college, she was using these pills to cheat on tests, and she never once, as a young person with the ability to go back 5 days in time, never once thought, I'll check the lottery numbers and be filthy rich. Never once. Are you kidding me?
She never wanted that kind of attention, Pete. She never wanted
bullshit.
Yeah,
bullshit.
No, dude. I've had the ideas for like a time travel spec script for a while, and literally plot point number one is when was the biggest Powerball payout? Like, go back to that date.
I'm just saying, like, there's so many things that this movie just ignores, and it'd be like, hey, maybe there could be a cool reason why she didn't do that. Maybe she did do it once, and something really bad happened, almost as if karma would be like, hey, you won all this money, you weren't supposed to, so all your family died, so reset time and don't do it this next time, or something. I don't know, anything.
Yeah, no. I mean, it's totally fair. I wasn't even thinking about this till we started the review, but I also appreciate when we talk about the idea of how she got into the time loop, like how that first loop must have gone, because the idea is like she gets the thing, she realizes, she goes through the 5 days, however those first 5 days looked, she gets to the end of it, she realizes she's about to die, like right on death's door, and she opens up these pills and takes one.
Yeah, it's almost like that would actually be a more interesting use of the time, is to show that first loop. Maybe not the first time round, but like, because I do appreciate that, you know, she seems really sad in that first like loop that we see in the movie, because it's like, oh, she's dying and she feels sad about it, but then we find out that no, she's actually just really painfully bored because she's done this multiple times and she's sick of the family being overprotective and saying all the same things every time, and she's kind of frustrated with it. I'm like, okay, I actually appreciate that reveal. That's an interesting reveal that feels like a mechanical thing. I appreciate that. But yeah, it is kind of interesting to think, well, yeah, how scared was she this first time? And, you know, did she like remember at the last minute, or was she like struggling with the idea of taking these pills all week? Like, it was like, hey, as soon as she had this news, I'm like, oh, I could reset time. I could go back and, you know, do whatever. But, you know, we never get that moment of like her choosing to take them again, or you know, or maybe even like, as much as I'm not saying I wanted more flashbacks with a different actress when she was college aged, but yeah, maybe her like seeing her use them in some ways to get away with stupid stuff when she was young might have like really painted a picture of like how much of a crutch this was for her when she was younger. And how much of it's something that she abused, and maybe it was a big growing point when she chose to put them in a drawer and not use them anymore. She said, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to be a mom. I'm going to be family, married, all the rest of it. I'm going to pick that life. These moments of decisions could have been interesting things to see. Instead, she just tells us these things happened. This is a classic case of the movie constantly telling and not showing, and it's frustrating.
Yeah, no. And then the other thing, as long as we're talking about the pills here, a big portion of the movie is at one point bringing up the idea of these things are in a prescription bottle as she found laying on the ground, and they have her name on it.
Yep.
And a big part of the movie is like, where did the pills come from? Are we part of a bigger time loop where eventually, like, we are going to crack time travel? You're going to go back to that earlier date and you're going to finish the time loop. And maybe you could interpret that as what the ending is, but I hesitate to think so. I feel like this is just one of those things where it's more ordained by the time authority or whatever.
We're going to keep jumping around like this because this movie is impossible to talk about in order, because frankly, like, time loop movies in theory are always a bit tougher, but usually there's like a sense of progression, because like, okay, you've got this period of doing this in the time loops, but then we graduate to doing this next part, and they're easy to talk about in that sense. Because this one is so dull with how it does the things on each time loop, and it just montages its way through a bunch of stuff, there's no way to do it. So we're talking about the pills a bit. I want to talk about the subatomic man.
The nanoscopic man.
The nanoscopic man. There we go.
Yes.
what was this? What was this, David? Just out of nowhere, Paula just sort of says, oh yeah, I worked for this professor who successfully shrunk someone down. And I thought she was being metaphorical or something. Like, I didn't realize she was being literal. But then, like, she goes to get this clear box and says, the nanoscopic man's in here. And somehow we can talk to him using this, like, you know, keyboard, and then like his message will come up on this little screen.
He's wearing, like, we see at the very end, he's wearing like a spacesuit sort of thing. Yeah. So he's got some sort of like keypad on his wrist or something.
Yeah, but that was a shock though when we see him at the end, because after this scene we forget he existed. It's just this weird thing where they drop the pill into the box and say, hey, you're subatomic, can you have a look at this and run some data in there?
So just to recap going into this, they have the pills, she wants to run tests. Paula wants to try to break down how it's happening, like they want to break down the chemical stuff. Zoya has already tried that in her youth, and she's like, you don't get anything. There's some like quantum level of something going off, but it's too small to tell what it is. And she instead wants to try to replicate it. But Paula's like, wait a minute, if it's quantum scale, I got just the guy. And that's why we bring in the nanoscopic man.
Yes, which for the record is a glass box where you don't see anything because he's too small to see. So it's just a bunch
it's a flea circus. That's all it is.
It's a looking at a glass box, and then this text appears on the little screen in the corner to say, oh, he's talking to us. And I'm like, is he depressed? Is he like, you know, morbidly like suffering because he's down this size? Like
that's what part of it is. So when we get the setup, Paula explains, hey, nanoscopic man, he was shrunken down by researchers, but then the researchers realized they couldn't make it stop, so they put him, like, they've contained him and all that, but they explicitly say they couldn't figure it out, and so they just put the box in a drawer, and they like are saying like whatever. And I guess that maybe because of his shrinking or whatever, some side effect is he's functionally immortal, like he's never going to die by natural means, but the idea is that eventually he's going to shrink to the point where he just disappears. He's going to be too small to reasonably exist in any form, so he's just going to disappear. I think it's supposed to be metaphorically hinting on the idea of that loneliness, that idea of feeling separated and not being able to interact with other people, but then, you know, having one person reach out, Paula, and him being able to have conversations, because Paula's like, yeah, no, he's cool, he's chill, he's a nice guy to talk to.
It mirrors Zoya's whole thing, right? She's on her own, she's shrinking and shrinking in a metaphorical sense until she disappears. Like that's it, it's just mirroring her story. Like I get that part, but it's such a wild thing to throw out there and then just ignore for most of the movie until during the montage at the end when we're cutting around everyone. We also just cut to the subatomic man in his spacesuit surrounded by like bubble molecules or whatever. Yeah. And it's like you're trying to be like it wants to do the it wants to be linoleum. It wants to be these more artsy sci-fi movies where it's here's the quirky kind of visual and it's kind of majestic. But the movie's kind of like, artistically speaking, not that visually interesting the entire time. So while this shot does look all right of seeing this guy in the spacesuit and he's surrounded by all these bubbles, nothing else in the movie tonally fits that. So it just feels out of nowhere when you see it at the end.
Yeah. No, I mean, between the there's like three big sci-fi things in this movie that set it apart from like, this is just today. The one is the pills. The second one is the nanoscopic man. And the third one is the fact that black hole in chest is just a medical thing that apparently astronauts get. And it's just a totally normal thing. And they don't like have her being researched and dissected and all that stuff. It's just she's on hospice, send her home, do whatever you can. Like, no, this is just a normal thing, to which I did see a trivia bit and I had to verify it myself. They say that the black hole is in her chest and is the size of a peanut. Pete, a black hole that has a radius of 1/3 of an inch, not even the size of a peanut, but 1/3 of an inch, would weigh as much as our Earth. It is like, I understand the idea of it metaphorically, and that's how you're supposed to view it. But as soon as you put it in terms of like, oh, okay, what's the logistics of that? You have a black hole and just, the entire Earth is dead. Got it. Understood. Right.
I want to make something clear here, right? When I say I want some more thought going into the science fiction elements, I'm not saying I want something that is completely scientifically accurate. Well, one, because you can, because it's, it's made up stuff. But yeah. But like, I just want them to do something to take it seriously and make it mean something, like have their own rules, whatever it is. But it feels like things are just thrown out there. It don't matter. But the worst thing about it, though, is that the characters talk about the pills like it does matter. Like, that's what their focus is that they're going to solve the pills. And it never goes anywhere. They never it's not even they don't figure it out entirely. They never even discover anything new about them. It's never like, oh, well, we've at least conducted that they must come from space or something like that, which wouldn't be much, but it would be something. Like, you've learned something about them. But no.
Yeah. No, I mean, if I had to like equate this over to a different genre, like I would think something along the lines of like a thriller. Like there's an assassin who's coming to kill us, and we have to figure out who it is beforehand. And we're going to talk about the assassin. We're going to talk about the idea of like, how do we know who it is? But then every other like line we speak about the assassin, we're going to talk about our status as a married couple. And we're going to say like, where are we, you know, how's things going on right now? It's like, maybe that's not the best time to deal with that stuff.
Yeah, and obviously one of the big things here is about regret, and it's like, hey, you dated someone named Mark when you were in college before you met your husband. Maybe he can help. And she didn't want to do that. You know, she even finds like a newspaper clip that her mum kept, which is like the idea that her mum regretted her not staying with this guy. Like, that was the guy for you, you little shit. And I'm still disappointed that you dumped him. But she kind of finally sucks it up to try and go and see him, and she finds out that he's gone, maybe dead. I don't know if the movie was trying to imply that he was the subatomic man, like he became the shrinking man or something.
I didn't even get that. No.
I mean, if it is, then it's a very loose thing. But basically, she meets his son, who's like, oh, he's been gone for months, and it's all very like, oh, he's died, is kind of the tone. And basically, she finds out that the son's mad that he was too obsessed with his work and didn't spend time with him and his family. So this obviously leads to her feeling guilty that she's been doing all these loops, not spending time with her family, and she gets all emotional listening to the voicemails of her. Because this is the thing, in all of these time loops where she's went off to go with Paula, it makes it very clear that she basically just runs away at the start of the time loop, and her family is just worried about her for the week, thinking she's missing or dead. And then the loop resets, so it doesn't really matter. But when she checks her voicemails when this moment happens, all she hears is, Mum, we're worried about you. Are you okay? We're really terrified. We're hiring a PI. Please don't be dead, Mum.
That's actually one of the things the movie brings up that I feel is wholly original, and I wish they would have dealt with it, which is Paula brings up the idea of like, look, we don't, like, we're trying to crack time travel. We're trying to understand this. We don't know if we're on a singular timeline or a branching timeline. And every time you do this, where you take a pill and you go back, are you thinking about the family that you're leaving behind in that timeline? And she's like, no, I've never even considered that. And we get like a glimpse of the family just sitting around the surprise party table. The cake's still there. And they're just like, should we go check on her? Is she fine? I was like, no, let's just give some time. I like the idea of that, of leaving behind this family, because it, again, plays into that idea of, like, if we're viewing this metaphorically, her going to another timeline is death. It is the idea that she's died and she's leaving behind these people, and how is she leaving them behind?
Yeah, it's a nice idea. I don't think it does enough with it. Like, honestly, the more interesting thing to me is not so much that little moment with the family, because you could argue that's while she's still up there taking the pill. It's not really ironclad that this is definitely after, per se. It's just kind of like, what if? But there is a moment where she takes the pill and disappears with Paula, and Paula's still sitting there for like a minute looking around, and it's like, oh, does it just take like a minute for like the universe to like reset, or do the people in this version of the time loop just all keep continuing? You know, does this one keep going? So there's like a million Paulas out there that have met her and like know all this stuff. So that was the other thing for me, is that after they do have their fight where Zoya wants to give up because she's basically been doing this research for like however many loops now at this point, and she's not accomplished anything, which, because they're running the same test again over and over again. Would you believe it? Nothing else happens from it. We're
wasting a whole day on the nanoscopic man. God damn it. We don't need the nanoscopic man.
But they have this fight, and I don't even remember what it was that Paula complained about, but it was something that from a previous loop that really rang false with me. I brought that up in the spoiler-free section. But they go outside, and they're sitting, and they have this heart-to-heart where Paula says one of the reasons why she's helping her is because, you know, Zoya's not the only one who has reasons to go back in time and fix something. And she just tells her dramatic backstory. Again, it's so, like... the most uninteresting.
It was Christmas Eve. Her father went up in the chimney, came down to Santa Claus.
It's just such a... like, obviously you have to have some exposition, you have to have some of this come out somehow. But I feel like this movie just constantly has characters just like, okay, it's time to confess my backstory bit that is relevant to what we want to do now. So she talks about how when she was 15, 16, she took the parents' car and she thought they would notice that she took the brake off, but they didn't, and she accidentally murdered her parents with the car.
To be clear, she ran over a nail and the tire popped.
Yes, but...
Yeah.
But
I'm just saying, like, removing the brakes is an entirely different thing than just the tire blew out. There was nothing on her.
Yeah, but the parents died from it, though, right?
Yeah. She blames herself for something that is definitely not her fault. Like, it's not something that, like, could reasonably be assumed.
Yes, but it's like, okay, you've given her reason to want to figure all this out. And the weird thing is that, like, at the end of the movie, when Zoya makes this choice to, like, stop looping and just sort of accept death and, like, spend her last week with her family, and she's happy to do that, she, like, gets all of her research, goes to Paula and says, hey, here's the research, here's the pills, I'm passing this down to you now. Like, maybe you were always supposed to be the one who does this because you actually care about doing the research. Here it all is. And it's like, okay, this has some weight to it because Zoya is accepting death here, right? And maybe Paula doesn't quite get that in the moment because she's not been through all these loops like she has. But I'm like, okay, she's accepting death and we're going to do this. But it almost felt like by that point in the movie, though, once she stopped seeing Paula and went on this trip to go see Mark and ended up talking to Mark's son and like sort of rekindled with her family, because she goes through a few montages with her family again before she has this final one. You know, she takes her mum to see the rhino and some other stuff, right?
Yeah. I feel like that's all in that 1 week, though. Like, it all is implied to still be that one final week.
I mean, it might be, I don't know, but the point is, though, is that by the time she goes back to Paula, it's been like 25 minutes since we've seen her, and I'm like, oh yeah, Paula was a character. I guess we have to come back and like give her some sort of wrap up and see her off into the sunset, and that's what it ultimately ends up being.
That is a recurring thing of any time we see the end of a loop where like Zoya is there in front of Paula, as because the tell is her nose starts bleeding.
Yeah,
that's the sign that she needs to take a pill again. Paula always asks, like, hey, are you going to come back? Are you going to find me? And Zoya's just like, yeah, you know, I always come find you. But the implication is on that last go around, as she's realizing, like, how important the family is that not this time. Like, she says it, but it doesn't feel like she's going to. But then, of course, we go back and, yeah, she does still clean up that friendship. She does still allow for one last time with Paula.
Yeah, I think she does. I don't think it's still, like, I think what you're remembering is all being one loop. I think there's two there. I think there's one where she does a lot of stuff with the family and then loops one last time to go and get the research and give it to Paula, because I think that was the start of a fresh loop. And then it's like, okay, the rest of this week's my final time. And that's fine. Like, you know, but like I was saying, like, the movie stops. Like I mentioned the heart-to-heart on the stairs where Paula gives her backstory. There's like 3 other scenes just like that where Zoya sits down and gives more of her backstory. There's one where she's like telling the story of like, oh, she was meant to go to Europe with Mark and do this like fancy stuff that would have led to a career in science, but she didn't. And that's all just, again, a heart-to-heart where she sits down and says it all to her. And I remember that one specifically because that's the one where she gets the nosebleed and says, oh, it's time to take the pill. And it stuck out to me because it was broad daylight. And I'm like, wait, this is clearly earlier in the day. And I'm like, wait, are the loops getting slightly shorter each time so that in theory they'll eventually not be enough where you're like, okay, now you've only got a day, now you've only got 5 hours, and so on until it's over.
So it wouldn't have worked with it being daytime, but that was something where when she was describing the initial loop process where she needs to wait until it's out of her system and then she can go back that long. If it being out of her system is exactly how long back she travels, theoretically, every time she waits like an extra second to take the pill, then that should be a second later that the whole window is shifting down. We never explore that. It's never something that's done anything with. But I was thinking as long as the 2 lengths are equal of jumping back and clearing out of system, that should be the process.
Or alternatively, if it's out of her system by like 12 hours earlier, but she just doesn't take it until the birthday cake part of the story, then she could effectively keep bumping it back a little bit earlier and earlier.
Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah. You've written yourself into a corner here where either one should be true. So there's a few things I wanted to touch on otherwise. One of the things I was just going to bring up earlier when you were talking about the Mark stuff is when she goes and checks out Mark's stuff to see if he could help. Obviously, he's already dead. But as she's looking through the research, she realizes, oh, wait, this is my research.
He kept
this
it,
is
yeah.
the stuff I was into and I was looking up. And it's immediately that thing where the son is saying, I just wished he would have paid attention to me. I wish he would have been there for me. And because it's the exact same research, she's easily able to make that parallel of like, oh no, I'm ignoring my family.
I do want to say though, like the son's saying, "Oh, I just wish he'd paid attention to me," is again another example of like, oh, you're just saying it out loud. Like you're
The thing,
you're not actually like showing that he feels hurt that his dad was too obsessed with his work. You're having him spell it out to the audience. So over and over again, I just felt like so disengaged with all of this obvious storytelling.
There's one point where the son asks, like, what was he like? What was my dad like? And Zoya responds with, like, oh, he was so smart, so intelligent. And he just kind of sighs and is like, yeah, that's all anyone ever really has to say about him, you know? And I'm like, that says wonders. That says, like, A, he doesn't know what his father was like as a person. He only knows the academic. The fact that no one else is able to say anything else like that is disappointing to him. That does wonders of informing the character. And then he just outright says, I want my daddy back. And it's like, well... That's a bit. The second thing is immediately following that scene is where we get the voicemail sequence where she's listening. There's just this huge emotional breakdown of her realizing.
Are you wanting to talk about the visual of actually seeing a black hole forming in her chest?
Yes and no. Yes, in the fact of like, okay, so like she should be dead. Like that should absolutely happen. But regardless, it's visual metaphor. It's there for the sake of it. So be it. What gets me is this entire time she's like, I have to go back. I got to, I want to do things right this time. And she's scrambling for the pills. Correct me if I'm wrong. She doesn't find the pills. Unless I blinked and I missed.
She does. She does. It just takes her a minute. But it does. Right. But it is, again, it's like that mechanical thing for me where I'm thinking of science fiction in terms of rules and in terms of how you can play with those rules. And I'm like, oh yeah, what if she's in this moment where she's like dying, she knows it's time to take the pill, but like in her emotion, in her frantic nature before this moment, oh, she doesn't know where the bottle is, so she's like trying to find them, and we have like a tense moment of like, oh, how dangerous is it if she doesn't get to that bottle in time? What happens at that point? So
she just exits the time loop, as far as I'm aware, but because of exiting the time loop, she dies.
Yeah, like, but like, play with that a little bit, like, give us that tense, like, it was almost too late to like actually take the pill kind of thing.
I appreciate the idea that, again, opening this story in media res, and she's already done the loop however many times. I appreciate the fact that we, from a visual standpoint and like a narrative standpoint, always end at the same point. We ended at this birthday party. She just blew out the candles and then she goes off to the bathroom. I do think it would have been interesting to give an extra 30 seconds of buffer time so that at some point in the middle of this movie, she can be held back from taking the pills. Like maybe her family's like, no, please stay, like talk to us, whatever like that. And
it's almost like they're lost. It's almost like they're the obstacle getting in her way that's making it dangerous. Yeah, you could play with that a little bit. Yeah. And
so she's now pissed off. It's like, you guys cost me like 30 seconds I didn't have. Like, how dare you? Sort of thing.
The other thing as well, this goes back to like the writing being too like, surface level, spelling things out, is like so many of the reasons why other characters exist is like, again, very surface level, where it's like, oh, there's this one scene that's set a few years ago, when her daughter was maybe in high school or like, college age. And it's like, hey, the daughter's saying, you know what, I want to be a composer because I'm a pianist, but honestly, like, I'm not like this, I'm not some maestro. I'm not like, there's people who are way better at it than me. I think I'm going to accept just being a teacher and just like teach people how to play piano. I think I'll be happy doing that. And the mum tries to convince her to not give up. And the daughter's like, wait, do you think that I'm lesser if I only teach how to play music? And she's like, no, of course I don't think that. And it's like, clearly, this is just tying all into this idea of her regrets and what she thought she was going to change the world, and she didn't accomplish that. She's given her daughter the exact advice that she herself needs to hear, but it's like so just like obvious that I don't find any of it satisfying to hear.
Yeah. The other thing that they kind of touch on, it's much earlier on when she's discussing her regrets of not going to CERN with the college group and kind of giving that all up, is she describes to Paula a conversation she had with her husband, who I think was just boyfriend at the time, she's saying this stuff of like, yeah, there was this trip, I could have gone, I could all that, but I talked to my husband and he said, just make sure that that's what's going to make you happy. And the way it's phrased and the way that they have the character as they cut to him saying it, it feels very guilt trippy. It feels very dismissive of the idea of like, I don't want you to go. You probably shouldn't end up going. This may not be something you're good at. And so she takes it as like, almost a resentment against the husband of like, this is the life I could have had. But then fast forward 2 scenes, we get a flashback where we see how it actually played out.
Yeah, the real conversation.
Yeah, he's extremely supportive to the point where she's the one who's saying, I don't want to go. I want to stay here with you. Like, I love you and all that. And he's like, okay, well, like, you're free to do whatever you want, but just make sure that's what's going to make you happy. And, you know, it's overly supportive on his part. And it's just the way that she regrets the way her life has gone, where she's reaching out and like blaming him for this rather than herself.
Oh God, there's so much unexplored too. Like, one, like the husband's a very thin character because he is just supportive husband man. There's like nothing else to him. But two, like all the things you could do to explore this idea of this woman who, at least in the early part of her relationship with him, was using these time travel pills to redo things. Like, what if in a time loop they broke up because she pissed him off so much that she was able to go back and fix it? And how kind of all borderline manipulative that is, that he will never know that she once made a mistake that got her dumped, but he's still with her because she went back and fixed it. And it's like, there's so much to explore with that.
That's in that final loop. They just have a heart-to-heart. It's after she's already like accepted things and whatnot. But she basically says, you know, well, do you think there's a me out there who was successful, who went out and did all these great things and did whatever? And he's like, I mean, maybe, sure, but maybe that's a loop where we didn't meet or we didn't have our kid or something like that. And it just really spells it out, the idea of like, there's more important things than...
To be clear, though, she never phrases it that way because he doesn't know about the loops. Like, her family do not know about her going back in time. So she's just
talking about the hypothetical, saying, is there a world out there? And he's like, maybe, but we all led up to this moment with family here, and that seems more important than the idea of success.
Do you know the sad part is I actually thought of like a twist they could have pulled before the end of this movie that might have like been really interesting from like playing with the time elements of it, is that the reason why the bottle was left for her, right? And again, assuming this idea was herself from the future, but it was herself from a future from a timeline where she went to Europe and never married her husband, and she didn't get the happy family life. And so she had all the scientific success and she did all these things and had the career, but she always regretted never having the family life. So in a previous long loop, she went back and fixed it so that herself would grow up and make that choice to marry, was his name, Donald, and have the kid and go on through that way. And like, I actually think that would have been an interesting reveal of like, no, this was her fixing the long-term mistake she already made.
No, I'm going to add on to that. I'm going to add more to that to make it even more head trippy. The idea of it is that imagine there's a starting loop where she doesn't have the pills. She goes through life. She's not happy.
Yes.
She gets the pills somehow. She then goes back in time, gives the pills to her.
Just on that, somehow. I don't think it has to be somehow. In this life where she took the science path, she's an expert scientist who probably invented the pills in the future.
Okay. Yeah, fine. Have that. Whatever it needs to be.
Well, but I'm just saying, it all fits together. No, there's actually stuff to do here.
Peter, let me finish the thought because it's going to add to it.
Okay.
She goes through the loop, and then now she's on another loop, and we see like, okay, she's using the pills, and she is like an even more accomplished scientist, or maybe she takes a different path. She does whatever, but she still brings back, when she ends up dying, whenever she gets to a point, she's unhappy. She brings back the pills to her younger self, and we keep on doing that. Infinite loop number of times, where every single time something changes, something is different in the loop. Where she's, maybe it's not a lot, but like something small changes, but she's always unhappy. And this is the first time, the end of this movie, where she has finally come to terms. She's saying, yes, I'm happy in this one. And maybe she doesn't give the pills to say like, you know, this was it. This was the good go around. However, that would then complete the larger time loop of the idea of like, now she doesn't have the pills. Now she's able to do the same setup again to get to this final point.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. I think I like the idea of it just been like one correction as opposed to like she's been infinitely looping her entire life somehow until this one.
I mean, that's fair. I appreciate the idea that like this one has more weight and more meaning than just one extra go around. Like this one is the one where it's like everything happened the right way.
Well, that's why I think it would have weight though, is because it's like, oh, I've effed up my life so bad, I've got one chance to try and fix it, to send myself on the other path, and this is the one, even though she'll never know she had that other path in the first place. But the irony is that she's constantly second guessing herself, thinking, could I have had that life with the science? Like, did I want that life? She's constantly, that's the regret that keeps popping up in her head. But none of this matters though, because neither of these things are what actually happens in the movie, because it chooses just to do, ethereal, like you're going to change the world, little 12-year-old version of me.
If we're talking about the vaguest possible thing that you can go back and say somebody in a time loop, you're going to change the world, you're going to do amazing things. Oh, you were just talking about the love of your family and not making great scientific breakthroughs? Okay, maybe you could have said something like that. I do want to talk
more specific. Okay. Actually, hold on. Before we get into anything else, just because we're talking about the ending stuff. So,
well, that's what I was going to say,
yeah, there is an idea at the end that I do actually think is quite good. I just think, but at that point, it didn't matter anymore because I just didn't give a shit about the characters and the story. Like, it lost me too much by that point. But I do like the idea that at the birthday party they throw for her, which is just, the immediate family, is that they always say, oh, we're going to do presents. And she's always said, no, I'm going to go upstairs first. And that's when she takes the pill. So because this time she's not going to take the pill, she just stays there and lets the present happen. She doesn't even realize that she's never actually seen what the present is because she's never actually made it that far. So when she's opening the box, she's like, wait, I don't even remember. Have I ever actually owned this? And then she sees what it is, and it's the reveal that she's going to be a grandmother, right? Or like her daughter's pregnant, and she gets all teary-eyed. And like the actual reveal of what it is it's fine. Yeah, generations move on, blah blah. But this idea that she never even realized that she never actually got to the present and found out what they wanted to tell her, so she'd been missing this very heartwarming news the entire time, I think is a good idea. I think just in this movie in particular, by the time we get to that point, I was so done. I was so out of it. It wasn't enough to like make me care or bring me back. So
yeah, no, I get that. I understand. By that point, I mean, I was definitely I had to pause the movie twice just because of how I was watching it. One time was about half an hour in, I was still up on the movie. I was like, all right, cool, sounds great. The other one was about 20 minutes from the ending, and I was like, I'm ready for this to be done. As I saw it was 20 minutes to the ending, I was like, we should be a lot further along with this final wrap up than I think we are at this point.
Yeah, like I said, I think one of the big problems with it is that once she meets up with Paula, which initially I was excited for because I thought, hey, I like Edebiri, but also because I'm like, oh, this is going to be the proactive part where they're going to try and do things and solve things and all that. And it ends up being a bunch of meaningless shit that goes nowhere, peppered with lots of heart-to-hearts where they just explain their backstory and feelings. It's like the most uninteresting way the story's told the entire movie, but it's also almost like meaningless. Like you could cut out the entire thing. You could cut out Paula's character entirely probably and still have the points that need to be made by the end made, so she still learns the same lesson she was going to learn.
Yeah, it's not a Doc Brown and Marty McFly. It's Doc Brown and his therapist. Like,
yes,
it's just a bunch of talking instead of actually doing this stuff. There is one thing I need to bring up, just because in a movie that has been so safe and samey visually throughout this entire process, like, yes, there was that sequence where she's having the emotional breakdown, the black hole starts growing, but even then it's very tame, it's very small. The final death of this character is so jarring that I had to rewatch it like 3 times of like, did that really just happen the way I think it did?
Is it even a death technically? Does she become a god? I don't know. She basically, time freezes around her at the birthday table, and she looks around for a second, and then she just sort of like implodes out of existence. She goes whoosh.
That's the thing. If it was just like a teleportation out of there and just like, oh, okay, that's whatever it is. But no, we see like, if you go frame by frame, it's like 4 frames of like slightly imploding, arms coming out of like this central point, legs coming out of the central point, and then gone. And I'm like, that was simultaneously so quick that I barely noticed, but also one of the most disconcerting parts of this whole movie of like, I just watched someone undergo spaghettification of like falling into a black hole is from the inside. That just seemed so violent in the moment that it was, and yet it was over in the blink of an eye.
Yeah, I honestly, like, admittedly, it would have been just as like sappy as the rest of the movie probably if they'd done this, but like, I think the smarter choice would have been to just have her die in bed with her family around her or something, instead of trying to do the one last sci-fi weird moment that they did with this. Because it just kind of feels like, oh, you're trying to, again, keep the sci-fi vibes going, but at this point, I don't believe in them anymore. Like, they're not working for me. So the final moments of, like, it's kind of like the dad, because her dad used to tell her stories about how important she was going to be and all that, and that comes up a few times. And it kind of, like, transitions from him telling a story about her being this special girl to her talking about to herself as a 12-year-old. Yeah. So the final shot of the movie is, like, 12-year-old her looking down and looking with a smile on her face, being like, oh, the possibilities are endless. My future's ahead of me. You know, life is, you know, but a buffet table of which I can feast on anything I want.
Yeah, no, I guess I'm on the same page as you. Like, to be clear, I am upset with the same parts that you are. I think it's just not hitting me quite as hard because I do appreciate the sappier elements a little bit, like, you know, without getting too deep into, like, specifically things going on in my life. I have had a level of, like, thinking about death and thinking about mortality and stuff like that. And maybe this movie's just hitting at a particularly ripe time for me. But even with that being said, a lot of times when I think of a movie that hits at a particularly ripe time for me, it hits hard. It, like, really, like, embeds itself in my consciousness. This one doesn't have that. Like, even though all the themes are things I'm thinking about, it's not something where I'm like, and that was the perfect movie I needed to see in that moment. It isn't.
Yeah, no, it's a movie that even if you kind of like it, and I can see a lot of people connecting with it a little bit more than I did, for sure. I think even people who like it are going to forget about it in a year. I don't think this is one that has staying power and is going to be on favorite lists. I'd be, like, shocked if it is, because it just doesn't have that spark to it. It doesn't have that fire in it. I watched the whole... This doesn't really fall into this category. Don't get me wrong. This is a bit different. But, like, I watched a whole, like, video on YouTube a couple of weeks ago that was about why are all the blockbusters that Netflix and Amazon make all, like, super forgettable fluff that no one cares about and, like, don't matter, but they all cost a fortune and so on. And it went into Electric State and, like, some of these other ones that I never even heard of. Like, there's a whole Indiana Jones one starring John Krasinski that I didn't know about.
Seriously?
Where he's, like, traveling the world and he's doing, like, Dan Brown / Indiana Jones style, like, looking for artifacts stuff.
All right.
But it looked bland, it looked shit, it looked terrible, and it's like, yeah, none of these have any staying power, and this, to me, kind of fits into that kind of realm of, like, there's no staying power, because it feels like, and I'm not saying AI wrote this, right, I'm not saying that, but it feels like a person watched some other movies and tried to do it themselves, but doesn't actually have anything that interesting to say to actually, like, really ingest into it to make everyone feel something. It's just kind of going through the motions of, like, well, you know, vaguely this idea of, like, a woman who's dying and reassessing her life. It's all there on the surface. It's all there in theory. I can't deny that those ideas are being presented to me, but they're just, you know, I keep coming back to the word tepid, the word lukewarm, because that's all it feels like to me. It just never goes into, like, higher gear. It never feels like it's actually picking up momentum. And I feel like when people hear me say that, I think people are thinking, oh, you want an action movie? No. All genre types, like slow dramas, should still have a sense of momentum with the characters building and evolving into something that's going to crescendo to a finale. You know, like we have reviewed various types of movies. You know, we did the Criterion Show for a bit, and we did Paris, Texas, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. But there's such a sense of momentum and discovery as you're learning things about the character and how things are alluded to throughout and so on. And yeah, maybe it's unfair to say, hey, this you know, a smaller budget sci-fi movie should have the storytelling, like, equivalent of Paris, Texas. That's a bit much of an ask, but it's just an extreme example to share the idea that any movie of any type should have a sense of purpose and forward momentum. And if you're going to do something that goes against that, then you have to be, like, you know, unless you're like David Lynch or someone like that who can really just mess around with things and makes things feel weird and intriguing in a completely unique way, it just feels like you're going through a bunch of emotions waiting for it to get to the point that it's trying to make. And that's all I felt the entire time I was watching. So I'm like, I get it. She's going to be thankful for the life that she had. Whoop-de-doo. We all know it's going there, and you've not made me care about it once this entire movie. Like, she's not unlikable, but I also don't think she's that likable either, which is almost worse. She is just a void. She is a black hole, in effect, of a character.
End it there. We got it full circle.
So, anyway, any final thoughts you want to
I mean, I agree, again, with the the ideas of what you're saying just maybe toned down a little bit. It's something that I think has an audience. I don't think that it's a very rabid audience. Like you said, I don't think this is on anybody's best of list, but I do think that there's going to be people who get something out of this movie. It is a matter, though, where everything that it touches upon could have been done better. It could have fleshed it out more. It could have been more well thought through. We could have paced things a little bit better. As much as I'm talking about the editing, I'm talking about the editing in a stylistic sense. The idea of like the montage, the idea of occasionally we get just like images of these characters as they were growing up in order to instill the point of like time passing or whatever like that. It's not something of editing on the larger scale of this movie has good pacing and it is very well blocked out. Like, no, that's also still a problem. So yeah, I finished this movie and then I went to go do the homework, and without spoiling the homework, this was like not even on the same level. It was just like a sheer disappointment when it came to like, oh no, the homework was so much better on every level.
Interesting. I'm excited to see what the homework was now. Also, I want to point out here, just to add on to what you were saying there, is this looks like it was lit like a network TV show most of the time. There's nothing visually that interesting about it 99% of the time. So I want to make that point. There's another actor in this actually that I didn't even bring up was in the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer, because despite the entire conversation we just had, we never brought up his character once. There's a professor character who again, we have a sequence where he recognizes Zoya from when she like studied under him, and he very quickly gets to a rant about how you're not committed and you're lazy and you expect results and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh, you're telling us all this stuff just so that 10 minutes later she can come back to him and say, you're right, I am lazy, I am this, I am that. And I'm like, okay, she's had an arc. She now agrees with what the character said to her. I don't know, again, just very uninteresting way of just having someone say it and then having her just repeat it all again and agree with it. I don't know, completely uninspired. But anyway, he was on the Watchers Council on Buffy. I was
gonna say, I pulled up his thing as you were talking there. I'm like, wow, this must be a main character. He's on 3 episodes. How do you recognize these people?
He's on more episodes. I mean, technically, I suppose the other guy was on 1 episode of 3 different shows, but that's the same number of episodes total.
How do you recognize these people? That's what I'm saying.
Easy. He was also in Ghostbusters 2.
Yes, he was the judge in that.
He was the judge, yeah. Yeah, so.
Crazy.
He's just one of those character actors. He pops up in places.
Yeah, no, I didn't recognize him. He had a beard in this one. I didn't recognize him with that. Like, it's a long, scraggly sort of thing. When I see him clean shaven here, I'm like, oh yeah, I recognize him.
Yeah, he's one of those guys, especially in the 90s. You'll see him pop up in a bunch of stuff. But I had to mention it. But I think it's funny that we never even touched on his character, because ultimately, other than just giving an address for where Mark is, like I never really felt that we got much from that character.
No. I think Paula ends that conversation following her out and it's just like, hey, that guy's a dick and you don't need to listen to what he says. Check it out, Nanoscopic Man.
Yeah, pretty much. So again, just a lot of uninteresting side characters, things that just don't feel like they pay off in any meaningful way. And then on top of all that, all the stuff that might make it fun, all the stuff that we could be exploring, the time travel and time loop stuff, is they pretend they're going to explore it and then they don't really explore any of it, which is almost worse than just not exploring it in the first place. So yeah. All right, let's rate Omni Loop out of 10. David, what have you got?
So usually when I'm bouncing between 2 scores, it doesn't feel like it's that much of a difference, but for some reason this one feels like a significant difference in quality depending. So I'm bounced between a 6 and a 5.5. And I feel like a 6 is me saying like a lot, whereas a 5.5 feels damning. I think I got to go with 5.5. I think I do appreciate elements of this movie. I want to make that clear, but I very much agree with your earlier sentiment of I'm going to forget about this in a week. Like, this has zero staying power in my mind. I'm just, so much of it was ripe for the picking of being able to examine some very deeper themes in the idea of like using time loops and mortality and that sort of stuff, and the idea of staving off the inevitable. And it just feels like everything was a group therapy session more than it was a movie. So, yeah.
Yep, there's a good idea there, and it's just a giant uninteresting whiff for me. I gotta just go with a straight 5. I think it's extremely mediocre and forgettable. I can't say it's like terrible. It's like you've got competent actors. It looks fine, not good, but fine. But there's nothing, standing out about it. I felt very little from it. So other than frustration and just wanting it to end at a certain point. So there you go. That's Omni Loop. We're done with that. David's got a homework movie in just a minute, but let me give you some information about what's coming next. So next time on the show, which is actually later this week because we're doing 2 this week, we had none last week, is Tron Ares. We're finally getting to Tron Ares. So,
oh boy, I've been missing Jared Leto for like 3 weeks. No, not even 2 weeks.
Yeah. No, by the time it comes out, it'll have been almost a month, I think.
Will it?
Yeah.
Man, Masters of the Universe really stuck around comparatively. Like, that's still in my head. Yeah, you're right. Damn.
Yeah, almost. So yeah, that's coming up next on the show later this week as of recording. So, or as of release. So look forward to that. Also, we'll be back to just normal one a week starting next week, of course. Going up until whenever. But yeah, you can support the show on Patreon, patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. Helps out a bunch if you do, of course. It helps keep the show coming, helps keep Collector's Cut coming, our other movie show, which just did the Supergirl movies, we did John Woo season, and after a couple of standalones, including The Odyssey, which is obviously the big new Christopher Nolan film.
That's just going back to Odyssey season.
Yeah.
Or Odyssey, Nolan season.
Yeah, Nolan season. We've got Submarine season coming up, so if that sounds like fun, check out some submarine movies with us over August and early September. But yes, thank you very much for everyone who already does support us. Of course, you have access to the Ratings Rundown segments, Extra Reels, we do that once a month. That's a show where we review some of the worst movies of all time. Things like 2004's Catwoman, coming soon, LaQuisha. Look forward to that.
The very oft well-regarded movie LaQuisha. Everyone talks about LaQuisha.
But yes, every week on the show, David goes back and checks out a movie that we did on the Ace before he joined, so he can be eventually caught up and have seen all the movies. So David, what was this week's homework movie?
Well, you got one part of that wrong, Pete. We got a countdown coming up, and therefore I did not do one from this show.
That's right. I made a special recommendation for David to watch a movie that we did on Streams After Midnight, the horror movie podcast I did with Tim, because the movie's also sci-fi, and I thought it would be relevant to the upcoming 2000s countdown.
Yes. And it would, because, dear God, if I did not put this on the list based off of what I just saw. I watched The Mist.
Yeah.
I had, okay, so, I'm not a virgin in regards to spoilers with this movie. I had not seen the whole movie top to bottom, but I knew how it ended. I've been full spoilers for anyone who's not seen The Mist. Check out The Mist.
The implication by saying you're not a virgin to spoilers that when you watch a movie, your spoiler person got effed. Like you got banged by the movie, so you're no longer a virgin for the movie. There's a weird way of phrasing that.
For most movies, I wouldn't say it that way, but the ending of this movie will absolutely F you up. Yes. So, yeah.
So
I
did you give a spoiler warning for this? So
I did give a spoiler.
Okay, right. Spoilers then for The Mist. Right.
Go away. No, I mean it's great. It's fantastic. I miss top to bottom is you want to talk about a character study. You want to talk about the right way to interweave the sci-fi elements and still manage to develop characters and like get them this is top tier.
Because so it's obviously this mist rolls into town. There's monsters in the mist, and the main character and his daughter and a bunch of other strangers.
Son, but yes,
sorry,
son.
Oh, son, sorry, not daughter.
Yeah.
Whatever. But they basically get trapped in the supermarket with a bunch of the townsfolk, and so it's a bottle movie. They're trapped in there. It's too dangerous to go outside. How do we survive? And the science fiction of it, other than the fact that there's monsters from maybe another dimension, they don't have to explain it because it doesn't matter. But it's just, lets you think a little bit. The whole thing is that you get this microcosm of this group of maybe 80 people represent society and how it'll break down. and how like all these things will happen because mistrust and like power grabs and like all these things, and it's like, oh, we have two factions for it. Like, it's so good.
Yeah. No, what we brought up in this review is the idea that it's focusing too much on wanting to solve the sci-fi stuff without ever actually wanting to solve the sci-fi stuff. This movie, it doesn't try. It doesn't tell you like, oh, we're gonna, by the end of this movie, we're gonna tell you where all these monsters came from. No, it has no predilections of trying to do that. It's just like, you're in the same boat as all these other people. Monsters showed up. You're probably never gonna know why, but you still got to deal with it. And that's the proper way to deal with that sort of stuff if you don't want to spend the time analyzing where exactly they came from. This also was a first time watch, and she was completely unaware of my wife watching this.
Oh,
yeah. And like I was about to put on this movie, but then she had to go do something, so we just watched it late at night. And like, she has work the next day. We get to the ending of this movie, she's like, we need to put on like some comedy or something for at least half an hour. Because like, yeah, the ending of this movie, I'm completely unaware as to what the original Stephen King ending was, but like, whatever, I know it was changed for the movie, and the fact that this movie did it, like, Christ,
it went darker.
So good. Yeah.
Well, because it's Frank Darabont directed this, who also did Shawshank Redemption and Green Mile, right? And the way I've always heard him describe it is Shawshank's a movie about hope, The Mist is a movie about losing hope.
Yeah, pretty much. You watch the main character, you watch the lead guy, and he goes into this movie with like, yeah, no problem, we'll take care of this, everything will be fine, we're gonna be cool. And by the end of the movie, he's like, oh, life has lost all meaning and I don't want to go on. And it's like, yeah, all right, fair enough.
And God, that like the music at the end with the sort of the chanting and whatnot is all, everything plays out. Oh, these, like,
it was super late at night, and I was kind of a little bit aware of my soundbar being maybe a bit too loud, but I'm like, I dare not change the volume at this point. Everything needs to remain constant. You just need to be in the moment.
Yeah. Are you in an apartment?
Yes, I have. Okay. I have downstairs neighbors who are very elderly, and I don't think they hear anything we do. So I'm using that to my advantage.
Because I tell you what, if I was in a detached house, I would not be thinking ever, oh, my sound's too loud. No, it'd be
not crank it. If I'm in a detached house, I'm assuming, like, even if I have neighbors 5 feet away, I'm assuming they'll never hear me.
Yeah. Doesn't matter how loud the sex dungeon is at 4 p.m. on a Monday. They'll never hear it.
That's prime sex dungeon time. What are you talking about?
Hey, sex is best right before dinner.
True. I can't argue that point. I've got a rumbly tumbly usually. So like,
yeah.
Anyway,
yeah,
missed. No, it's fantastic. I'm super glad that I got to watch it, and it will almost certainly be on the countdown. So I'll say 8.5. Okay. I think it's fantastic. It's really, really strong. The only thing keeping it a little bit is that maybe it's just because it was made in 2008 or 2007. Maybe it just is a little bit of the time. There are elements that feel just a little bit cheap looking, but it's like, that's the end for the scale of this movie, of what it's working on. That's fine. It's not something to like poke holes at.
Yeah, the CG is a little bit, but it's like it's fine for what it is, because like everything that's good about it's great. And no, it worked when it came out in 2007. I've seen it multiple times and it's always held up. It's never faltered. Although it's funny though, because when it came out, I wasn't really familiar with Andrew Brower yet from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. So it's funny going back and watching that and seeing Holt be such a dickhead. It's like, oh, I'm not used to this. Usually so likable.
I was like, man, Holt's cursing. And then the other part of it is Frank Darabont. I believe he had a hand in Walking Dead, if I remember correctly.
Yes. I mean, the good couple of episodes before things broke down, and then he had to sue AMC about it and all that. But yeah,
I'm just saying there's a couple of carryover characters from Walking Dead, and obviously that came after this.
Well, he had a few regulars. William Sadler's in it, and he was in a few of the other Frank Darabont movies before then and stuff. Yeah, so there's a few mainstays that he has in there. Toby Jones is in there. Also, there's a character who becomes like a really like hateful villain, where you're really rooting against her, and like that's a really good side of that movie as well. It's one of the things that I love about Train to Busan, is that also has a character who you really hate by the end, and I'm like, oh yeah. Anytime I think of that, I always go back to The Mist and that one character. I'm like, oh yeah,
and it's played so well, because like so many times when there's a character that you are supposed to hate, they cross the line of why would this person be able to exist at all? Like, this person should have been run out of town or put in jail forever ago. But this one, I feel like she starts off just not, it's not even that she's any less of a hateful person. She's disregarded. And it's only because the situation gives her power that she becomes that level of hateful.
Like people just laugh her off and she's like, oh, the crazy religious lady, but then this situation happens and all of a sudden she's the extremist who's building power and like people are starting to listen to her and it's like, oh no, this is terrible. This is how all these like cults start popping up in the post-apocalypse.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm watching this movie with modern day lens and I'm like, I think it's Toby Jones who says something along the lines of like, look, when things are going bad, somebody shows up promising to give you answers or whatever, you're going to listen to them. And I'm like, oh God, people need to hear that.
No, excellent stuff. Yes, Mist is fantastic. So, yes, cool. All right, well, there you go. That is the show, everyone. That is the Atomic Cinema Experiment. Thank you very much for joining us. We do appreciate it. Keep watching science fiction and computer at Salsa.